Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's workshop titled Navigating Leadership Roles as Black Women Before, During, and After the Doctorate. Today's workshop will be presented by Dr. Maria Green, an HR leader at a nonprofit organization who has worked in various HR roles in the healthcare, higher education, human services, and transportation sectors during her 30-plus year career. We're also joining us is Dr. Sharon Graves, who has been with the University of Maryland, Baltimore for over 16 years, working in the School of Medicine and the graduate program in life sciences, where she currently serves as an administrator and member of the senior leadership team. And finally, we have Dr. Michelle Wilson, who completed her doctoral degree in management at the University of Maryland Global Campus. Additionally, she received her bachelor's in business administration degree in accounting from Baruch College in New York and a master of business administration in international finance from St. John's University in New York. I will now turn the floor over to our presenters for them to take lead on the workshop.
Thank you.
Good afternoon or good evening. I'm Maria Green, and so I want to welcome you to our workshop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss navigating leadership roles as Black women before, during, and after the doctorate. So we have 3 talking points, and so each of us will lead those talking points with a question or basically a summary of what we're going to talk about. And so how we know each other is we all attended University of Maryland Global Campus. We are all proud graduates of the Doctorate in Business Administration program. So I'm going to start off. And again, thank you all for joining us. If you want to ask us any questions as we go through the sections, I think we can probably take questions, and we'll have some time at the end as well for questions. So first, we're going to give you a brief background about ourselves and why we pursued a doctoral degree. So we'll start with Dr. Michelle Wilson.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. And thank you all for joining today. As you already know, I'm Michelle Wilson, and I have 25 years of work experience. Most of those years, I managed people and processes, and I worked in varying industry. The industries include hedge fund administration, where I am right now, software development, which I still do it as part of my hedge fund administration working experience, and I have extensive knowledge in auditing of state and local government, insurance, hedge funds, and other types of entities. My area of expertise, as you can deem from what I've said so far, has been in the financial services industry, specifically with software solution within the alternative investment space and the capital market solutions. I currently manage a global team of business analysts, and we're responsible for a proprietary application. And that's where I spend most of my days and my time. As Deanna said earlier, I am also a CPA, and I do have my project management certification. And I would say it has been my personal thirst for knowledge that led me to UMGC. It wasn't a requirement for me for my career or for the role or for any opportunities that I might be exploring. I was just really, I've always wanted this terminal degree, and it took me many, many years to decide to go do it. Once I looked around at school and settled on UMGC, it was like, it was like a no-brainer, because this is what I always wanted.
So Sharon, you're next.
Well, yeah, so I I have been in academia for a long time, and I work with, I'm at the University of Maryland, Baltimore. I'm in the School of Medicine, and I work with actual PhD students. So the students that I work with are getting their PhD in biomedical or population sciences. So I have been working around a lot of PhDs and MDs. And after I got my master's, I talked to my mentor on campus who has multiple degrees. And he basically told me that I needed to get a doctorate. And I'm thinking, well, why? And he said, because that's the only way you're really going to get far in academia. And as a woman, you really should. And I said, okay, I will think about it. And it took me a while. It took me several years before I decided. I think I always knew that I wanted a terminal degree, but I didn't really know what that was going to look like. And I think that I settled on UMGC because of my master's, and I thought this would be kind of a good idea. Now, I work with a lot of people that have doctorates, so it really makes me feel good about going through the process myself, because I actually work with a lot of students and kind of counsel them along the way. And it kind of helps me, now that I have experienced it, that I can kind of explain some of my experiences as they are going through their experiences as well. But I think it was always really important for me to do, especially being in academia and working in academia for over 16 years now. I really think that it was important for me to have that terminal degree, because I think it really is helping my career, which I am going to be moving on to another position in diversity. I'm going to be the executive director of diversity, equity, and belonging and strategic initiatives, which is something that came about after I got my degree. So it actually did help me in my career, because my now supervisor realized that there were several skill sets that I had, and based on my background, my research background, that maybe I should be in a different position. So I'm actually happy that I did it, and I really do think that it happened to help my career along the way. Dr. Green?
Yeah, and so I had, like Michelle, I thought I was going to have a terminal degree. I think I knew as a small child that that's something I wanted to do, based on some other members of my family pursuing terminal degrees. However, I think it took me years and years before I had something that was important enough for me to study. So I work in HR, I've worked in human resources for since 1990. And I've seen a lot of different things occur. And for me, part of it was how women treated each other in the workplace, and why we were not a more cohesive unit. And once I saw, based on my experiences, as I worked in healthcare, in corporate America, also in nonprofits, and looking, at some similar experiences across those different environments, I decided that I really wanted to understand, and why women weren't working with each other more productively, and why there was so much incivility. And so once I had something that was interesting to me, I decided, okay, now I'm going to go back to school. Had I tried to do this 10 years ago, I really wouldn't have had a topic that would have, where I would have studied enough and been willing to write a dissertation on that topic. And so that is how I got to where I am. So one of the things that, and I'm going to just shift a little, so Michelle, Sharon's, and my paths are, all of our paths to the doctoral program were different. However, by the time we got there, we each had a desire to research a topic that led us to the same program, and then eventually to the same dissertation advisor at UMGC. And so I will go to our next talking point.
Okay, so I'll take that, Maria.
Mhm.
So We're going to discuss the process of our doctorate journey, right? How we selected our research topics and how our finding changed our perspective about DE&I. So, Dr. Sharon?
I am one of those rarities, I guess, as we were going along the way throughout our journey and our coursework, and we were trying to figure out what our topics were going to be. I had already knew what I wanted to study. And it was kind of funny because I realized that on my essay, when I applied, I knew that I wanted to talk about women of color and some of the challenges of leadership that they had. And I guess it was just kind of my personal journey and how I looked at, and I work for a predominantly white institution where we don't have many underrepresented people. I work with underrepresented students and trying to recruit them, and also trying to create an environment of diversity, equity, and inclusion within our student body and within our, not just our classrooms, but also our lab spaces. So I noticed that, there weren't a lot of underrepresented people that were in leadership positions. And then I started thinking, well, how is this across various industries? Is this something that is missing? So I kind of figured that it would be something interesting to study. And because it was something that I felt was quite personal, I thought that maybe I would do this, and maybe I would find something that would help me along my journey and maybe help others. And it was kind of interesting because once I started going through, I studied, my actual research was on women of color and their ascent to senior leadership positions within US organizations. And it was kind of interesting to see how some of the studies that I looked at, they weren't even looking at race or ethnicity. They were actually just looking at women in general and their experiences. And it was kind of interesting how some of the authors of some of the studies that I looked at began to notice when they were interviewing different women that women of color were having different experiences than non-women of color. And that wasn't even the point of the study, but they then began to realize that that became a major topic within their study. And I thought that that was really interesting because I think that when we look at women in leadership, a lot of times we're not looking at ethnicity and race, we're just looking at women when we're talking about diversity. And I found it interesting in my research how women of color were then having all of these other challenges in the workplace. And I thought it was kind of interesting because I found myself having some of those same challenges in the workplace. So it became very personal for me. And I found that a lot of the things that in my findings, I found it very interesting, and things that I began, once I started talking to other people, I realized that a lot of people didn't even realize that all of these struggles were happening to the degree that they were happening. And I found out that a lot of women of color, especially Black women and Hispanic women, were leaving leadership roles where they were set up to fail to start their own businesses, which is a whole other research topic on its own, as far as I'm concerned. But I found that it was kind of one of those things that I realized that it was a personal journey for me, and I learned so much, and I'm happy that I took that journey. Maria.
Okay, so my like Sharon, I had a topic. I knew what I was going to study, and I was dead set on that. And the way UMGC's program works is, before you start your dissertation, we had this one class or course where we had to do a systematic review, and then we had to submit a paper to a journal. And so I went in with the intention of studying instability among women. And I really just exhausted my interest in that particular topic at that point. But the other part of that was, this was, that was in 2020. And with all of the social unrest that happened in 2020, I really felt like I needed to focus on something more important than women just not getting along. That is a very important topic, and I still care about it. But I really wanted to focus on unconscious bias. And so what ended up happening is I talked to my advisor at the beginning of the first dissertation course, and I was like, I just really want to talk about, I want to do something around unconscious bias, but I'm not really sure what it is. And so she was the person that suggested, microaggressions. And as we were talking, I'm Googling like, okay, what does this really entail? And then, I realized that actually was exactly what I wanted to study, because within the incivility that I'd witnessed or experienced in the workplace, there were those microaggressions as well. And so I really wanted, and there's a lot of research out there about, what you as an individual can do if you experience a microaggression. But there really wasn't anything about how the organization is responsible for making sure people feel like they belong. And one of those is, to address microaggressions. And so that was, what I decided I really wanted to focus on. And I think how this research really changed my perspective is because, again, I wasn't sure, was there something that organizations could do? And through my research, I found that there were some, evidence-based strategies that organizations were already using to mitigate microaggressions, or at least mitigate the impact of microaggressions, as well as there were certain things that recipients of microaggression were dealing with themselves, or they've come up with their own solutions, like going to employee resource groups, or even, using, faith-based sources to deal with microaggressions, when the organization really should provide more training and policies and other, they should use other tools to mitigate the impact of microaggressions. And so, my perspective was definitely different, but more than anything, I wasn't that familiar with the topic of the term microaggression. And literally, I'd heard my niece, talk about microaggressions, and I didn't really know what it was. And then once I looked it up, and I was like, oh, I've been experiencing these, since junior high school, because I went from, African-American community for, through K through to 6th grade. And then I moved to another part of Washington, D.C., where in some cases I was the only Black person in a class, and then continued to sometimes be the only Black person in class, even into college. And so, so having that experience, it's like everything that I'd already experienced was in my literature review, without me realizing that there was a name for what my experience was. And actually the microaggression's been around, the term was coined in 1970. So, I think I definitely have a different perspective, as well as I'm certainly able, when something happens and I see it in the workplace, to address it. And we'll name it and then address it. So it's helped me, be able to even, talk to other people who are experiencing microaggressions and say, well, how do you feel about that? And et cetera. So, but I don't want to get ahead of this, because that's another question, but it definitely changed my perspective about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And, I'm really glad that the topic I chose, is what I chose. So.
Okay. So unlike Sharon and Maria, when I started the program, I did not have a specific topic that I wanted to research. I could almost say that I had no idea what I wanted to pursue. And one of the good things is that at our first in-person residency, I think it was the dean who had come in to speak to the entire entering cohort. It was all of us our first time in. And she did ask that question, who knows what they want to research? And there were a few people who raised their hand. I remember one young lady who finished with us. She was actually with the same advisor the three of us was with. She knew exactly what she was gonna do, but I don't think she ended up even researching it. But the dean did assure those of us who had no idea where we were gonna go and how we were gonna go that it was okay, that the course was structured in a way that we would find our way, and that I did. You know, as I went through the program, I find that much of my research in other classes, and in particular this this class that Maria mentioned, we had to do the last course before we entered the dissertation year, right? We you know, most of those courses, I found that it led me to problems that individuals, managers, and or organizations face regarding diversity and inclusion. Now, as I did these readings and research and had conversations with people, did I know specifically where I wanted to go, what angle I wanted to do? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, when I did that course, I was so sure that for my dissertation, I was going to be looking at women, just women in general, not necessarily women of color, but looking at women representation in leadership. And, you know, as I entered the dissertation phase and, you know, just going through the literature review, seeing what was out there, what were some of the problem areas, where the gaps were in the literature, what problem would I solve, right? And sitting with our dissertation advisor, weeks in, weeks out, nights, just, you know, that whole process, just trying to find my way. I finally landed on, you know, my dissertation topic. And what I did, that's a little bit different from, well, it's different from what Maria and Sharon did. My dissertation covered the strategies for recruiting people of color professionals in US organization. And I focused on the talent pipelines for recruiting, and I looked at just an ecosystem approach to it, right? What will make organizations successful if they do have strategies to recruit people of color professionals? I'm sure you guys have all heard senior executive in large organization make statement to the effect that, yes, we'd like to hire more professionals, but, you know, we don't know where to find them. Hence my look at the broken and leaky talent pipelines that's, you know, having these organizations feel that, you know, they are willing to, but there's no one that they're attracting. So in my research, I, you know, wanted to figure out what tools, well, not that I wanted to figure out, that's what I found, that, you know, what what these organizations needs were, you know, tools, processes, just some specific strategies to approach these, to attract the talent. And this doesn't have to be at the time that they want to secure a person for a particular role, because we know that a lot of this starts way before people get to college, right? One of the things that I found, that the way to mend these broken and leaky pipelines are to increase the access through mentorship, affiliations with affinity groups, sponsorship, etc. So, you know, how has it changed my perspective? I think that my perspective changed, that there are a lot of things that I took for granted, right? I was in a position that I'm pretty much happy with. My career has gone along a path that I was pretty much okay with. And, you know, I never really paid attention to how can other people that look like me feel the way I did. I remember when about eight years ago, when I moved to Florida, this young lady, she looked at me and she was like, "Oh, you're in a good spot, right? This is a large organization, global organization." They said, "You're in a good spot. You check so many boxes here." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, you're woman, you're Black, and you're immigrant. You check so many boxes." And I'm like, "But," she said, "look around you. There are no other managers like you." And I'm like, "Why is that?" Because there are other people that I went to school with. There are other people who look like me, who has it. Why aren't they coming to these organizations? So that's one of the things that I believe my research changed my perspective. Instead of taking my position for granted, to try to figure out how it is I could help other people like me, whether from the organization or helping to mend these broken or leaky pipelines, to have these have people like us, you know, want to and be eligible, be available to these organizations, and for these organizations to know where to find us. Okay, so in summary, right, what we all three of us have in common was a great dissertation advisor, Dr. Ward. She helped us work through our perfectionism. We also overcame our fear of failure. As you can imagine, you don't go into this dissertation believing that you don't know what it is you're doing. You don't go into this process feeling that you aren't able to do this. You believe you're the best writer. You know how to research, and Dr. Worf did help us put things into perspective, because when you get your feedback, of course, you're not always going to be thrilled, right? We found that the doctoral program challenged our perspective about what we wanted to do with our careers. So I'll turn it over to you, Sharon.
Thanks. Amen to that.
Yes.
That feedback was something else.
It was.
Any questions so far before we move on to the next segment? We'll be happy to take any questions, or we can wait till the end. I don't know if anything that was said, we're going like over it kind of in a very broad way of what we've experienced along the way during our doctoral journey. So, but if you have any questions so far, please let us know. Otherwise, we're going to move on to discuss how our research has impacted our respective careers. As you heard, we all took on these diversity topics, and of course, after you learn all of these things throughout the dissertation process, especially when you're doing research and come to certain realizations, it has some kind of impact on your career, whether it's your current career, what you want to do, or where you thought you wanted to go. So now we're gonna kind of go into that, and we're gonna start with Maria.
So yes, so I went out full throttle, and I actually had this conversation earlier today that I wish I had taken some time to rest after defending dissertation. I defended in December, and by I started almost, I took the Christmas off, and then I started applying to those, or submitting requests for presentations. And so I right off the bat got two. One was the College of University and Personnel Association, and which is like the SHRM for Society for Human Resource Management for higher ed. And so they accepted my proposal, and I spoke because one of the things about microaggressions is there's certain industries where they're more prevalent. And so one's higher ed, one's healthcare, or professional schools. And so I spoke at the Coupa conference, and it was a very interesting experience because there were a lot of people, who were there to get information about, my dissertation topic about, which is the strategies that organizations can implement. But there was also, a lot of feedback about, well, I've experienced this microaggression, what can I do? And, in some cases, it felt like almost like a counseling session because people really felt comfortable discussing their experiences. And so I spoke there, and then I spoke at the Washington, D.C. DC Government Human Resources conference. They have a conference for, their, I guess, all managers. And so I spoke there as well. And then at Black BDN at the conference in October, I was on a panel with two other or three other speakers. And that was a really amazing experience. If you have not attended the conference, I think you should, because it is just a really amazing experience just to see the work even that undergraduates are doing. And I also spoke at National Association for Independent School Districts, which is a large major conference where thousands of educators come. And again, the same thing, people were coming for solutions, but they also really just needed to talk about the microaggressions they were experiencing in some cases, because these are educators that, Black, Latino, and they are sometimes the only person, in their school, and they are dealing with diversity issues, or their students are dealing with diversity issues. And so what I found, is that there really is a need to talk more about, what organizations can do. So I've, also spoken at some, the local Society for Human Resource Management, a chapter meeting, and the Society for Diversity. Actually, I spoke just earlier this month at Society for Diversity. And so that's what I've done. I haven't, and I started an LLC, and because someone who heard me speak at Coupa asked me if I could come to work at to help them at University of Colorado at Boulder. They wanted me to come and help them because they were having some issues. And one of the things that they've done is actually conducted a survey, which is what you should do, conduct a survey just to find out, what employees are dealing with. And so they had microaggressions and incivility. And so as a result, they asked me if I could do training on both of those topics. And so now in my day job, one of the reasons I was hired was because, I did have this, doctorate, and my topic was, my dissertation topic was around a diversity issue. I just haven't had that opportunity to actually, we had other issues that we needed to deal with over the last year. And so we haven't just had time to focus on the DEI issues. And there are some, but I just haven't had the time to focus on that. And I'm looking forward to doing that, in this upcoming year. But it's definitely, for me, I didn't think I was going to start, an LLC. I did not at all. I didn't, I guess I thought I would use whatever experience I had at work. And the other thing that we learned in our doctoral program is that we needed to blog, and we needed to submit, articles to journals. And so I have been, I haven't done those things, but those are things that I plan to do because I am also an adjunct faculty member at UMGC. And so those are things that I actually want to do. But maybe if I had taken a break, I'd be ready to like go into that, but it's hard to actually sit there and say, I want to write and I want to, you know, get all these thoughts from my dissertation into a journal article. So that has been a challenge for me, is to, get, take time to get things published. So I think it's Michelle.
Yep. So you'll realize that I'm very different from Maria and Sharon. So I defended on a Friday afternoon. And when I was done, I literally collapsed on my couch. And I think I didn't move from that couch for a year because we were just coming out of COVID, or we were still in the midst of it a bit. Yeah, I think we were still in it. And I was just exhausted. It was 3 years of just intense studying. So my first thing was, I need a nap, a very long one. And then when I eventually woke up from the nap, I decided to connect with friends and family, because the program for me, it was very isolating because I had to work full time and do this and this, even though it's an at your pace study, you still had to meet deadlines. And being a procrastinator at times, sometimes those deadlines would creep up and it would require a lot. And, one of the things all three of us did during our dissertation year that summer, when we were supposed to be coding and put in the final touches on our papers, like other people in other areas, we were preparing for the EMS conference, which all three of us presented at. And although we did it, well, I can only speak for me, I did it very unwillingly. I keep saying my advisor voluntold me that I was doing it. And even though I did it kicking and screaming, I must say it was one of the most amazing experiences. I think it actually pulled my dissertation together for me at a time when I thought I had it together. I realized I really didn't, and that experience allowed me to really pull it together and really, come to grips with what it is that I was doing. The company that I work at is a large, well-known bank. And, they do have DE&I activities that I still participate in. I've had meetings with the DE&I coordinator, and I was kind of looking around to see if there was anything that I would be interested to do there. And, one of the conclusions that I came about for myself is that I think I want to look at this, and this is an area that I want to probably take my research further. I want to look at how I could help feed these broken pipelines. So I've started to have meetings with other people who are smarter than me and know more about this than I do, to help me look at some areas and explore other opportunities than, large organizations. One of the things in my research, I found that most of the studies work out of schools and hospitals, not a lot of large corporations. So I feel like I could best use the knowledge that I've gained and help mend these leaky pipeline from a different angle. I'm exploring some opportunities right now that I've been, since I woke up, I've been talking to people. I must say that, living in Florida, right, it has caused me a bit of anxiety because the whole, these three letters together, DE&I, are slowly not becoming very popular. Like one of the things that I wanted to pursue is academia, but I don't know yet how or where I would fit in Florida, because I'm really not looking to move at this stage of my life, but we'll see. So for me, it's just, now that I'm awake, my year is up, the year I gave myself is up. I just have to plan to carve something out, a solution for myself in a way where it's going to be rewarding for me and rewarding for the folks that I'm hoping to be able to help. Thank you.
So for me, my research has impacted my career in many ways. I'm just going to keep it real here, because I think it taught me a lot of things. I think it taught me that I was, not that I was sleeping, and not the Michelle kind of sleeping, but the other kind of sleeping, and just kind of accepting things around me. And I think that the research process just kind of made me, in my own job, realize that I needed to stop accepting things. And there were certain things that when, Maria, and talking about microaggressions, and I was experiencing all of these things, and I realized that I needed to stop that. And I needed to be more present. I recently attended this DEI seminar, and this really great speaker made a comment, and she said, "What you put up with is what you stand for." And it really resonated with me, because that's what I was doing. I was putting up with so many things. And after I did my research, I realized that, first of all, I was being underutilized in my organization. And I had told my supervisor that several years ago, that I was one of the most underutilized people in our unit. And he did nothing. And now I have a different supervisor that has now given me the opportunity to do our first diversity talk to our incoming students last year for orientation. And she was surprised that I had these talents, and now has moved me into a new position that I'll be taking on shortly, to form my own diversity office within our area. But I also got asked by the senior associate dean at the graduate school to do the orientation talk for all the incoming students for the graduate school, and do that DEI talk, because of what she heard that I could do. And I feel like it's kind of interesting to me, because I feel like I've been doing diversity things under my title. I've been working with underrepresented students. I've been doing all of these things. And it's unfortunate that it took a degree, a terminal degree, for people to recognize the Black woman that's been here all the time, that had all of these talents. And now you put doctor in front of my name, and now people were saying, "Oh, she can do things, she knows things." And it's really unfortunate that it took that. I think that now I am able to expand on a lot of things. I'll be doing more workshops, and I am working with an environments committee in the School of Medicine to change the culture. That's one of the problems that we had, especially with some of our faculty. I did do a talk on microaggressions, thanks to Maria giving me some really good insight on that for one of our residency programs in the hospital. So now people are beginning to hear about me. We have a lot of diversity efforts going on our campus, but now I'm able to be a part of that. And it actually took me going through this process, not just to learn more, but to kind of wake me up that these things are going on. They've always been going on. And I feel like now I'm a part of the change instead of sitting on the sideline. So in summary, we hope that hearing about our experiences will encourage those of you who are considering doctoral studies or struggling with perfectionism and fear of failure, which we all have, while in a doctoral program. We also want to encourage participants who are wondering what life is like after defense and graduation. Like if there's any questions that you have for us based on what we've told you about our experiences. Like I said before, very brief overview of kind of some of our experiences. If you have any questions for us, we'll be happy to take any questions.
So I have a question for anyone who's joined us. Are any of you all in the doctoral journey right now? It says, Rachel, looks like you're saying you're normalizing your own journey.
Yes.
Yes, I'm also in a doctoral program.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, and it's hard. And so that's one of the things, our dissertation advisor, I think she's called on some of us she had 6 students altogether, but to talk to her current students, because they need that support and need to understand that, it is, especially once you get to the dissertation, but, when even from starting with your first class, I always say, I tell the students, there's going to be tears because you are feeling like you're an imposter. Like before I knew what imposter syndrome was, I felt it in this in the program, but also like, oh, I'm going to quit because really I'm working and I'm doing all these things. There's just not enough time, and I had one of my uncles, I was caregiving for him initially, just very part-time, and it ended up being, a major job. And every time I had something due, he'd fall or something like that. And it's just like, okay, now and he wouldn't call the ambulance. Nope, he called me because, apparently I can go and lift, dead weight, but it was always something. And so that's one of the things, just having to manage others' expectations of me. And also just making sure I had time to care for myself. I wish I had done the self-care a lot better than I did. But one of the things that I learned from Sharon, actually, when we get ready to defend, going into the dissertation phase, she ended up taking off. She had enough leave, so she took off on Fridays so that she could work through her dissertation through the weekend. And it's like, well, and I didn't have enough leave because I'd only been with my job for like a year or so. But what I ended up doing is just negotiating working 4 10-hour days, which I was already working anyway, just not, I was working 10-hour days every day. And so I just negotiated that I would work 4 10-hour days and then have Friday off. And that helped a lot because some of those Fridays I just slept, because I was that tired from the whole process of, trying to write a dissertation and do all the research and everything. And so, there are ways that you can, navigate this whole process, and even, working with people at work, because of course, one of the discussions we had, I think in one of our courses, is how once somebody hears you're in a doctoral program, sometimes their opinions change, about you, and so that just even that process was interesting. So
A quick question. I don't know if it's quick. I have 2 questions. I think one, someone mentioned mentorship and having a mentor. I think it was Sharon. But I wanted to know if all of you had access to mentors to help you through the process. And if you did, mentors who are not like your advisors. And if you did, what kind of feedback or advice did they give you? And my second question is, I heard bits and pieces, but were all of you working in the field or industry that you wanted to work in after you finished your doctorate? So where I am now, I'm in a space that helps students of color navigate issues and challenges, undergraduates. But there is no, and my research is about Black doctoral students and retention. So I want to go to the next phase. What roles were you looking for after you got your doctorate?
Okay, so
Briefly about my mentor at work. He is a Black man, and he has been, I took emerging leaders. We were the guinea pig group of emerging leaders, and now it's a big thing at work. But he was one of the ones that started emerging leaders on our campus. And since then, I named him my mentor. Actually, I think I told him that he was going to mentor me. But I always told him that I was going to be really, really tough and stubborn. So he talked to me about just the challenges that I was going to have. And it's kind of interesting. He's a Black man. And one of the things, he sat down with me one time when I was struggling with people at work. I was going through microaggressions, and I was going through some things with some staff people that I was working with, because I became the supervisor of my peers. That's a whole other dissertation topic too. And one of the things that he told me was, because I told him, I said, I just feel like I am always, people are always after me. And he said, you know what? He goes, you're a Black female. And he said, you're smart. He goes, but you're also attractive. He said, and that's one thing that people don't like either. He said, and I looked at him and I said, he said, why does that even matter? Like, that's nothing. And he points things out to me that I typically don't pay attention to, but I sought him out and I basically named him, and we work on the same campus. He has a very high position on campus. But he was the one that really worked through a lot of my issues. I would just meet with him, we'd go to lunch, and he'd talk me through things. And I recommend that, especially somebody other than your dissertation advisor.
And so,
Sorry.
go ahead. I was going to say, so Hillary, one of the things that you may want to start thinking about your future, but if you want to work with students, you may want to look for a role in higher ed if you're not already in higher ed. And that's where you definitely can you can make an impact in the K through 12. But you have to really think about which area you want to work in. But I mean, there are university positions where you would work with students. And so I think that's definitely an opportunity. So my mentor, so one of my uncles went back to get his doctorate back in like 1970. So I was a little kid, which was why I even knew what a doctorate was when I was a kid, and said, okay, one day I'm going to have one of those, without realizing there was a lot of work that went into it. But I think my uncle and his wife, they would call me all the time. And then my aunt's sister also would call me like on a quarterly basis, because she'd actually earned a PhD probably 2 years prior to me starting school. And so she would just call and, talk me through things. But our advisor, and I don't want to, minimize, she actually, all of the things that we said she helped us through, this perfectionism, these are things that she struggled with herself. So she was extremely helpful with that. So I said, you're in higher ed, but finance. So you might want to start looking at some other positions on the student side. First year experience is one. A lot of schools have first year experience and some other programs. So that's my recommendation.
So one of the things with me with mentorship was that I didn't even know I needed a mentor. I was, the way I grew up, I figured that I could do everything on my own. Like when the whole concept of teamwork came in, I struggled to get to it. So when I finally applied to UMGC, one of the things UMGC said is that you have to take this this non-matriculated course. It's the course that will determine whether or not you would get in. And, I felt like I was always pretty good in school. I did a master's, I passed the CPA exam pretty quickly and all of that. So I was flying. I got to that course and I was like a deer in headlight from day one. Missed it because I've never taken an online course. I missed the first meeting because I didn't know you had to go in and set up to get alerts and all of that good stuff. So I called this friend of mine who had gone through a separate program and I knew he had struggled. So I said, he must be the perfect person to speak to. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to do this. This is like a totally different animal. I did not know that, I was ready to give up from that program. And Dr. Willie said to me, quitting is not an option. And I kept, every time the tears would come, every time I would throw my hands up, and that came more often than I would believe would come from me. My siblings used to look at me like there was something wrong with me. And I would always seek Dr. Willie and said, okay, I need you to talk me off this ledge. And it really helped having that other person, particularly somebody, it doesn't have to be somebody who has gone through that process, but somebody who went through the process and it wasn't a breeze for them. If you're finding that you're struggling that way, it's to hear somebody else's perspective is usually a good way to talk you off the ledge.
And I will say that that's one thing that kind of brought us together. We all had classes together, but we didn't really, get to really, really work with each other until we got to that dissertation phase. Like I think Sharon and I, we worked on some project or something. We were in a group assignment together, and then we had classes. We all had classes together. But once we got to that dissertation phase, that we did start talking to each other, like Michelle reached out to me one time and I felt really, after talking to her, I felt really good. I was like, okay, so I'm not a failure. Somebody else is, at the same place where I am. And same thing with Sharon, it's like Sharon would say, oh, well, all you need to do is this, and so that's the other part is using your cohort, the people in your cohort. They can really support you because they know what you're going through. And fortunately, we were not trying to compete with each other. We were just all trying to get through this together, and so that was very helpful. And there's always going to be somebody who's, they're going to be going faster than you are on things, but it is, I always say it's a marathon. It is not a sprint. So I think we're at 6. I don't know if there are any other questions. If not, we thank you for joining us. And, if you're in, I know some of you are students, hopefully this has helped, and you all can reach out to us. I think we're all on LinkedIn if you want to keep in touch with us. So thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to all of you as speakers today for being so transparent and sharing your journey, because I know sometimes it's hard for us to do that, but the conversation was very helpful, even to me and what I'm going through now. So I do appreciate all of you. Thank you again.
Oh, you're welcome.
You're welcome. And best of luck to all of you that are on that journey right now. We know what the struggle is. Best of luck to you, and you'll get through it.
Thank you all for providing all of the information that you gave. It was very helpful. To my attendees, I left a link in the chat for an evaluation. So could you please complete that before you leave? And I just wanted to let you know some of the upcoming workshops that we have. Just one second. All right, so on April 22nd, we have our conference, which will be held in Los Angeles. Then on April 24th, we have 2 more workshops in our series. The first one is at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and it's entitled Join the Revolution, the 4th Industrial Revolution in Education, How Technology is Changing the Way We Learn. And the second one is at 2 p.m. Eastern on the same day, and it's entitled Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Implications for Higher Education. So thank you again for all of that information you provided.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.